For 19 years, no one at Blackwood Ranch was allowed to touch Caleb Blackwood's old hat. Not his ranch hands, not his friends, not even the people closest to him. Then Emma Hale made one mistake. Believing she was protecting something precious, she took the hat while Caleb was away and tried to restore it. What she found hidden inside would reopen a wound he had spent nearly 2 decades trying to bury, and reveal that the story he believed about the person he loved most might have been a lie. But before the truth could set him free, Caleb would have to decide whether Emma's betrayal was something he could ever forgive. To understand what that hat meant to Caleb, we have to go back to the day Emma first learned. There was one thing at Blackwood Ranch no one was allowed to touch. Don't touch that hat. Caleb Blackwood did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The bunkhouse kitchen fell silent as abruptly as if someone had fired a shot outside. Peter Doyle, the newest hand at Blackwood Ranch, stood beside the wall with one hand frozen around the brim of an old brown felt hat. Across the room, Caleb stared at him, 36 years old, broad through the shoulders and burned dark by years beneath the Montana sun. Caleb Blackwood had a reputation that reached farther than his land. He paid his men when he said he would. He returned borrowed horses in better condition than he received them. He could quiet a frightened mare without striking her and settle an argument without reaching for the revolver at his hip. People trusted him. They simply did not know him. And everyone who had worked at Blackwood Ranch longer than a week knew one rule. No one touched that hat. Peter carefully returned it to the peg. Sorry, Mr. Blackwood, thought it belonged to one of the hands. Caleb crossed the room, lifted the hat and examined it. The felt was faded brown. The leather band had darkened with age. Near the crown was a small burn mark, black at the center and softened around the edges by almost 2 decades of handling. Only after checking it did Caleb look at Peter. Now you know. That was all. He carried the hat upstairs. Emma Hale watched him go. She had arrived from Pennsylvania 2 days earlier to stay with her Aunt Martha, who had managed Caleb's household for 11 years. Emma had expected Montana to feel empty. It did not. The land seemed too large to be empty. Grass rolled toward blue-gray mountains beneath a sky so wide it made the buildings look temporary. Cottonwoods followed the creek. Horses stamped inside the corrals. Harness rings clinked. Somewhere beyond the barn, a man shouted and cattle answered with low, restless calls. Yet signs of hardship cut through the beauty. On the road from Red Willow, Emma had passed abandoned corrals, collapsed sheds and houses with doors hanging open. The winter of 1886 to 87 had done that. Martha explained it while kneading biscuit dough that evening. Folks call it the Great Die-Up, she said. Snow buried the grass. Cold came hard and stayed. Some outfits lost half their cattle. Some lost near all. Emma looked through the kitchen window. Caleb was crossing the yard carrying a saddle over one shoulder. And this ranch came close, but survived, barely. Martha pressed flour from her hands. Silas Mercer renewed Caleb's note after the winter. Emma had already heard Mercer's name in town. He owned the bank, several commercial buildings, more mortgages than anyone seemed comfortable counting. Generous of him? Martha gave her a look. Silas Mercer is many things. I wouldn't use that one unless he was standing behind me. Later, while they folded linen, Emma asked about the hat. Martha's hands slowed. It belonged to Caleb's brother. Thomas? Martha looked up. You've been asking around. Amos mentioned the name. Thomas Blackwood disappeared 19 years ago. What happened? Martha folded another sheet. He sold livestock. Money was supposed to go toward the family debt. The money vanished. And Thomas? Vanished with it. Emma frowned. They assumed he stole it? Most still do. Did Caleb? Martha was quiet. I think Caleb spent years deciding which answer hurt less. That night, Emma stepped onto the porch. The heat of the day had vanished, leaving a cold edge in the air. Above the ranch, the stars seemed almost unnaturally close. Caleb sat at the far end. The old hat rested in his hands. He was not wearing it. Emma had noticed that already. During work, Caleb wore a newer black hat. The brown one rarely left the house. He ran his thumb over the burn mark. For a moment his face softened, then he saw her. The softness disappeared. I didn't mean to disturb you, Emma said. You didn't. Her eyes fell to the hat. His followed. The warning did not need words. Emma started toward the door. Miss Hale. She turned. Caleb looked down at the old felt. Some things last as long as they do because people leave them alone. Emma nodded. All right. She went inside. Caleb remained beneath the stars. The hat lay across his knees. For 19 years Martha had known he kept it. Amos knew who had worn it. Red Willow knew Caleb would not let anyone touch it, but no one knew why. No one knew about the final morning Thomas had stood in Caleb's bedroom doorway. And Caleb intended to keep it that way. Amos Reed remembered Thomas better than most people still living in Red Willow. At 68, the Blackwood foreman had white whiskers, a permanent bend in 2 fingers, and a way of looking at young ranch hands that made them correct mistakes before he spoke. Emma found him beside the barn repairing a breast collar. Was Thomas really a thief? Amos did not look up. That's a bold way to start a conversation. I've been accused of that. I believe it. He pulled waxed thread through the leather. Emma waited. Finally Amos said, Thomas taught Caleb to ride. That doesn't answer me. No, but it tells you something. He examined the stitch. Old Mr. Blackwood died when Caleb was 13. Thomas was 8 years older. From then on, he was brother, father, and bad influence all together. Bad influence? Thomas once convinced Caleb he could jump a creek on a mule that disliked both creeks and Caleb. Emma laughed. So they were close, closer than any two brothers I ever knew. Emma leaned against the fence. Then why would he steal from them? Amos finally looked at her. That is the question Caleb stopped asking. Caleb appeared at the barn door. Amos. The old man returned to his leather. Caleb's attention shifted to Emma. You collect questions like some people collect buttons. I used to teach children. That explain it? It explains patience. With children, she smiled. Exactly. A few hours later, Caleb showed her how to saddle Martha's mare. Emma had ridden before, but Pennsylvania tack and Montana ranch habits were not always the same. She pulled the cinch. Caleb shook his head. Twisted. Where? He moved behind her. His hand came over hers, guiding the leather flat. The contact lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Still, Emma felt the warmth of his palm through her glove. Caleb seemed to notice too. He withdrew. Like that. Emma glanced at him. Thank you. He busied himself with the saddle horn. Nothing more happened, yet that brief touch followed Emma into supper. In a place where supplies traveled long distances and cash was not always available, equipment could remain in use for years. Saddles were patched, reins were spliced, coats were resewn, hats were reshaped and rebanded, rather than discarded. Emma understood that kind of attachment. Her mother had earned extra money restoring clothing and leather goods. Emma had grown up around needles, hat blocks, beeswax, brushes, and strips of replacement leather. She knew how much of a person could remain in an object after years of use. That made Caleb's prohibition more interesting, not less. That evening, she found him near the pump. If Thomas abandoned you, why keep his hat? Caleb stopped. Emma immediately thought she had gone too far. He stared into the bucket, then said, I never said I hated him. She waited. His mouth tightened. That's the trouble. He walked away. 2 nights later, a storm rolled over Red Willow. Wind struck the ranch hard enough to shake shutters against their frames. Emma ran toward the barn when one of the upper windows blew open. Caleb reached it at the same time. Rain came sideways through the opening. Together, they forced the shutters closed. Emma turned, and a strand of wet hair caught around the button near her collar. Caleb noticed. His hand rose, stopped inches from her cheek. Emma saw the hesitation, so did he. For a breath, neither moved. Then Emma untangled the hair herself. Caleb lowered his hand. They said nothing. When they returned to the house, Martha was placing buckets beneath a leak in the upstairs passage. Water had run down the plaster near one wall, near the peg. Emma looked. The old hat was damp along the edge. She did not touch it. The following morning, Caleb rode south with Amos and 3 hands to gather cattle. They would be gone 2 days. Emma passed the hat before breakfast, Agan after lunch. By late afternoon, the damp brim had begun to curl. One section near the crown had softened, and an old stitch looked as if it might pull free. Martha came up the stairs carrying linen. She saw where Emma was looking. No, I didn't say anything. You didn't need to. If it dries like that, it may lose its shape. Then tell Caleb tomorrow. He'll be too late. Emma. Martha set down the linen. You know his rule. I know. Then leave it. Emma looked at the hat. I can fix it. That wasn't what I said. Martha's expression softened slightly. Kindness still needs permission. Then she walked away. Emma remained in the hallway. For most of her life, usefulness had been a form of love. Her mother never waited for a sick neighbor to ask for soup. A torn sleeve was mended before the owner noticed the rip. A loose button was replaced. A broken latch was tightened. If something could be saved, you saved it. That was what decent people did. At least, that was how Emma had always understood it. She looked at the damp felt again. Martha's words returned. Kindness still needs permission. Emma knew Martha was right. She also knew Caleb would not return before the next afternoon. The hat might be permanently distorted by then. She could dry it slowly, reshape the brim, secure the failing stitch, return it exactly where it had been. He would never know she had touched it. Perhaps, when he eventually noticed the improvement, he might even be grateful. That was the thought that decided it, not that she had the right, that he would understand afterward. Emma reached for the hat. Emma carried it into the small sewing room behind the kitchen. She did not place it near the stove. Wet felt dried too quickly could shrink or warp. So she set it where air could circulate and gently supported the brim while it dried. Hours later she began cleaning it. A soft brush lifted years of dust. The old leather band absorbed a small amount of conditioner. The hat smelled of rain, smoke, leather, and something she could not name. Time, perhaps. She found the failing stitch beneath the crown. It was an old repair, not professional. A hand had patched a reinforcement directly beneath the upper felt. Emma slid a needle under the loose thread. It snapped. Something shifted. She stopped, pressed lightly. There was something flat behind the reinforcement. Her heart quickened. She should have left it. She had already crossed one boundary. Opening another would not make the first one better. But as she tried to reseat the patch, the old thread gave way. A tiny wax-sealed packet dropped onto the table. Emma stared at it. Wrapped around the packet was half of an old receipt. One name was visible, Thomas Blackwood. The back door opened. Boots crossed the kitchen. Emma's breath caught. Caleb appeared in the doorway. He was wet from rain and mud darkened the lower half of his coat. His eyes found Emma, then the hat, then the open stitching. Everything in his face changed. Put it down. His voice was quiet. Emma immediately set the hat on the table. Caleb, the roof leaked. It was getting wet. You took it. I was trying to stop the felt from. You took it. Yes. He entered the room. Emma stepped backward. Not because she thought he would hurt her, because the grief in his face felt private enough to require distance. Caleb lifted the hat. His thumb found the opened reinforcement. What did you do? I dried it, cleaned it. The stitching was failing. You opened it. I found something. His eyes moved to hers. Emma picked up the packet. This fell from behind the repair. Caleb stared at the writing. The anger vanished. Fear replaced it. Did you read it? Only Thomas's name. Give it to me. Emma crossed the small room and placed it in his hand. His fingers trembled. She had never imagined Caleb Blackwood's hands could tremble. I am sorry. He stared at the packet. I was trying to save the hat. His eyes rose. You don't get to decide what saving something looks like when it isn't yours. Emma felt the truth of it immediately. You're right. That seemed to stop him. She swallowed. I should have asked. Caleb closed his hand around the packet. Leave, Caleb, please. Emma went. That evening, Martha closed Emma's bedroom door behind her. What were you thinking? Emma sat on the edge of the bed. I thought I could repair it before he returned. I told you not to. I know. Martha's anger was not loud. That made it worse. You didn't just take Caleb's hat, Emma. You took it out of a house where I have to keep working after you've gone. Emma looked up. She had not considered that Martha saw the realization. His trust in this house pays my wages, gives me a roof. You were willing to gamble something that belonged to me too. I'm sorry. Good intentions don't pay another person's price for them. Emma lowered her eyes. Martha's expression softened, but only slightly. Don't spend tomorrow proving you meant well. Spend it understanding why meaning well wasn't enough. After she left, Emma remained in the dark. Across the hall, Caleb sat alone. The hat lay on his table. He had searched it once before. At 17, the day after Thomas vanished, Caleb had torn loose part of the sweatband, run his fingers beneath the lining, pressed every seam, searched for money, a letter, an explanation, nothing. Then he had thrown the hat against the wall. He never searched it again, because searching meant admitting he still expected Thomas to explain himself. And hope had hurt more than anger. Caleb broke the old wax seal. Inside was a narrow sheet of paper, Thomas's handwriting. Caleb, if I don't come back, I did not leave you. Caleb stopped breathing. He read it again. Below, Mercer knows what I found. Look where Father told us never to look down. At the bottom, keep the hat. Caleb closed his eyes, and suddenly he was 17 again, before dawn. Thomas standing in the doorway, coat buttoned, the old brown hat hanging strangely from Caleb's peg, instead of sitting on Thomas's head. You planning to walk bareheaded all the way to Virginia City? Thomas had smiled. Keep my hat till I'm back. Caleb had laughed. Thomas had not. For 19 years, Caleb had obeyed the last thing his brother asked of him. He simply had never understood the request. Caleb found Emma beside the corral the following morning. He had not slept. Neither had she. I owe you another apology, she said. You already apologized. Not to make myself feel better, because you deserved one. Caleb looked beyond her toward the pasture. After a long silence, he said, The night Thomas left, he gave me the hat. Emma said nothing. He told me to keep it until he came back. Her eyes changed. No one knows that. Now you do. It was the first piece of his brother Caleb had voluntarily given anyone in 19 years. I searched it once, he continued. After he disappeared, you looked inside? Everywhere I knew how. His jaw tightened. I nearly tore the lining out. What made you stop? Caleb looked at her. Searching meant I still hoped there was an explanation. Wind moved the grass between them. Hating him was easier. Emma's eyes filled. I'm sorry. Caleb nodded. What you did was wrong. I know, but what you found is real. Emma drew a careful breath. Being wrong to touch it doesn't make what I found untrue. No. He removed Thomas's note from his coat. Look where Father told us never to look down. Emma frowned. Caleb knew exactly what it meant. Eagle's Watch. A sandstone rise north of the ranch where his father had taken both boys as children. Whenever they became lost, frightened, or simply turned around in the hills, their father had one instruction: don't stare at the dirt beneath your boots. Climb until you can see where you are. The brothers had hidden marbles, coins, and childish treasures in a protected crack near the summit. Caleb saddled a horse. You're going alone? Yes. Emma did not argue. That mattered. The climb took most of the afternoon. From the upper ridge, Montana opened below him in waves of grass and distant mountains. He found the old crack beneath an overhang. Inside rested a rusted tin wrapped in oilcloth. Caleb's hands shook when he opened it. Freight notes, mining camp advances, names, pavements, a photograph of Caleb and Thomas, both squinting into sunlight, and half a receipt. Caleb removed the half Emma had found inside the hat. The torn edges fit together. The complete document read, Received from Thomas Blackwood, full payment against the Blackwood account. Signed, Edwin Pike, agent for S. Mercer. Caleb sat down on the cold stone. The money had not disappeared. Thomas had paid it. Mercer had recorded the debt as unpaid. Their mother had lost land because of a debt already settled. The town had spent 19 years believing Thomas stole from his own family, because someone had given that lie the shape of an account ledger. On the back of the photograph, Thomas had written, "For Caleb. So he knows I meant to come home." Caleb pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes. Far below, fences cut the land into neat shapes. Amos had once told him those lines had changed repeatedly within his own lifetime. Settlers arrived, came, moved, federal agreements changed. Crow territory had been reduced again and again, while men like Mercer spoke as though a paper deed proved that land had always belonged to whoever held it now. Caleb had never thought much about the contradiction. He did now. Because for 19 years, one line in one ledger had changed the history of his own family. Paper could record truth. It could also make lies look official. Every favor Silas Mercer had ever done for Caleb changed meaning after Eagle's Watch, especially the most recent. The winter of 1886-87 had nearly destroyed Blackwood Ranch. Cattle froze standing against fences. Others starved beneath snow too deep to uncover grass. Men who had gone into winter rich came out owing more than their land was worth. Mercer had renewed Caleb's note at favorable terms. "You're a good risk," he had said. Caleb had remembered those words with gratitude. Now he entered Mercer's bank and heard them differently. Silas Mercer sat behind a polished walnut desk. At 62, he dressed like a respectable banker because he had spent years becoming one. He had started as a merchant creditor around mining camps, financing freight, provisions, and gold claims. When cattle money came north, Mercer came with it. Caleb Silas. Mercer gestured toward a chair. Caleb remained standing. "I hear you've been asking about old accounts." "I have." "Thomas?" Caleb watched him. Mercer's face revealed almost nothing. "I had hoped time had buried that particular sorrow. I found something." The faintest pause, then Mercer leaned back. Old possessions have a way of turning grief into evidence. Caleb did not show him the receipt. Mercer opened a drawer instead. "One other matter." He removed a document. "The Blackwood note matures in spring." "I know. I've renewed it before." "You have." Mercer folded his hands. "I expect we can do so again." Caleb waited. "Provided neither of us gives the other reason to reconsider. No threat, no gun. Just a sheet of paper." For 19 years, Mercer had kept Caleb solvent and indebted. The favor had been a leash loose enough that Caleb never felt it until he pulled away. By the following week, the story had changed shape in the telling. Emma had cut open a dead man's belongings. She had filled a grieving rancher's head with suspicion. Some said she had done it deliberately to gain Caleb's trust. Others suggested she had come west searching for security and discovered a wealthy rancher vulnerable enough to listen. None of the stories needed to be true. They only needed to be repeated. At Bennett's store, Samuel Bennett refused Martha additional household credit. Ruth heard him. "You extend credit to men who spend half their wages at the saloon. That is business." "And refusing Martha because Emma embarrassed Silas Mercer is what?" Samuel reddened. "You mind your own household." Ruth closed the ledger. "No." Father and daughter barely spoke for 6 days. When Emma learned what happened, she confronted Ruth. "You shouldn't risk your family for me." Ruth stared at her. "Interesting. What?" "You don't seem to enjoy other people deciding what risks you're allowed to take." Emma had no answer. That same week, Caleb began studying recent ranch mortgages. Amos joined him after supper. The pattern emerged slowly. Fees added after signing. Interest categories altered. Payments entered days late. Collateral revalued after the great die-up when desperate ranchers had no bargaining power. Thomas had found the method when Mercer financed mining freight. 19 years later, the language was more sophisticated. The principle was identical. One contract repeatedly mentioned land near Briggs Crossing. Caleb found Emma near the stable. He held 2 reins. "Will you come with me?" She looked at him. This time, he asked. He did not decide. Emma nodded. Yes. Abigail Briggs was 44. The moment Caleb removed the old photograph from his coat, her hand rose to her mouth. "Oh." Caleb's heart tightened. "You know him?" Abigail looked at him. "I helped bury him." For a moment, Caleb heard nothing else. Abigail brought them inside. In October 1869, her father had found a badly injured young man near the crossing after a wagon accident during a storm. "He lived 4 days, Abigail said. "Was he conscious?" "Most of the time." "What did he say?" Her expression softened. "Your name." Caleb did not move. He kept saying he needed to get back to his brother, Caleb. He was afraid you would believe he had left. Caleb stood abruptly. He went outside. Emma remained seated. Abigail glanced toward the door. "You can go after him." Emma shook her head. "He'll ask if he wants me." Several minutes passed. Then, Emma. She stepped onto the porch. Caleb sat on the steps with his forearms resting on his knees. "Would you sit with me?" She did. For a while, they listened to cottonwood leaves scrape in the wind. "I hated him," Caleb finally said. "Sometimes," Emma did not interrupt, "I would remember something good, then get angry at myself for remembering." His eyes shone. "My mother died believing he stole from us. Emma's voice was quiet. He spent his last night trying to get back to you. Caleb closed his eyes. She did not tell him that truth should erase grief. It did not. Truth simply changed what grief meant. After a long time, Caleb reached for her hand. She let him take it. Inside, Abigail opened her family's Bible. Families far from reliable public records often used the blank pages of family Bibles to write births, marriages, and deaths. In faded ink was one line. Thomas Blackwood, October 17, 1869. Caleb traced the name with one finger. Abigail studied the photograph again, then touched the dark mark visible near Thomas's hat. He already had that burn. Caleb looked at her. You remember it? He told my father he got too close to a campfire trying to cook coffee and keep a poker hand alive at the same time. A faint smile appeared. Said his younger brother laughed at him for a week. Despite everything, Caleb laughed once. He deserved longer. The laugh died gently. Abigail closed the Bible. There was another man. When? Several weeks after Thomas died. What man? Silas Mercer. Caleb became still. He came asking whether Thomas had left documents. Did your father tell him anything? He said no. Abigail hesitated. The man who signed that receipt. Edwin Pike? Yes, my father knew him. Pike worked for Mercer. Where is he? 11 years now. Another possible witness gone. Mercer would deny. Thomas was dead. Pike was dead. Caleb's mother was dead. The original books from 1869 might be gone. On the ride home, Emma pointed toward a distant section of fencing. Was that always ranch land? Amos, riding with them for the final miles, shook his head. Wasn't anybody's Blackwood land when I first came through? He looked toward the hills. Lines move faster on paper than they do in people's memories. Emma glanced at him. Amos nudged his horse forward. Crow country changed plenty before Mercer ever learned to call a deed proof of righteousness. He said nothing else. By sunset, Caleb understood the most poisonous part of Mercer's strategy. The banker had not spared Blackwood Ranch out of friendship. He had preserved it because a prosperous Caleb Blackwood, who trusted Silas Mercer, was the best defense Mercer could have. Caleb had been his living alibi. The Miller mortgage was due first. Jacob Miller was a widower with 3 children and a ranch too small to survive another bad year. When Caleb studied the note, he recognized the pattern immediately. Charges altered after signing. Payments entered late. Collateral adjusted downward. Mercer moved to foreclose. Caleb petitioned for a territorial review. Mercer answered by calling the Blackwood note early. Spring had not arrived. Caleb did not have the money. Amos confronted him in the barn. Your mother died saving this place. I know. Thomas died trying to save it. I know. And now you're putting it behind Miller? And the Webbs. Carter. Anyone willing to testify? Caleb had offered part of his remaining equity as temporary guarantee, so families who came forward would not lose their property while the examiner reviewed their contracts. Amos stared at him. You spent 20 years protecting what was left. Caleb looked toward the house. Thomas's brown hat hung near the door. Yes, and now, Caleb tightened the saddle strap. Now I know what it costs when every man only protects what is his. The hearing filled the county room. Ranchers lined the walls. Women crowded the rear benches. Silas Mercer sat at one table beside his attorney, Charles Wainwright. Caleb sat opposite him. Emma beside Caleb. Between them rested Thomas's joined receipt, the old freight papers, several recent mortgage contracts, and the note recovered from the hat. The territorial examiner entered. Everyone stood. Wainwright began with the weakest thing in the room, the past. He lifted the joined receipt in 869. He looked at the examiner. 19 years ago, he laid it down. The man who allegedly accepted this payment, Edwin Pike, is dead. Another paper. Thomas Blackwood, who allegedly made the payment, is also dead. Then he raised Thomas's message, and this remarkable document was supposedly discovered inside a hat. His gaze moved toward Emma. By a woman who admits she opened that hat without its owner's permission. Whispers moved behind her. Emma kept her hands folded. Wainwright continued. No witness saw Thomas Blackwood place anything inside that hat. Emma said quietly, No. Wainwright looked at her. I was not asking you. The examiner raised a hand. We may as well hear her. Emma was called forward. Her legs felt heavier than they should have. She sat. Wainwright approached. You removed Mr. Blackwood's hat from his home without permission. Yes. You opened the stitching. Yes. You removed the packet. Yes. And now you expect this room to accept your claim that you did not place it there yourself? A murmur traveled through the benches. Emma's stomach tightened. No. Wainwright paused. No? You should not accept it merely because I say so. His expression shifted. Emma continued. I grew up repairing hats, gloves, coats, and leather goods. My mother earned part of our living doing that work. Wainwright folded his arms. And that makes you an expert in documents. No, then makes me experienced with old stitching. She pointed toward the hat. The reinforcement was sewn with hand-waxed linen thread. The thread had darkened with age. The felt around each stitch had compressed and discolored over time. You can date thread exactly? No, then your statement proves very little. I can tell the difference between a seam opened yesterday and one that remained closed for years. Wainwright stepped closer. You were capable of opening and resewing. A smile touched his face. Emma did not retreat, but I didn't. How convenient. I did open Caleb Blackwood's hat without permission. The room became still. I was wrong. Wainwright's smile faded. I've already been told so by the only man who had the right to tell me. Caleb lowered his eyes briefly. Emma continued, but the thread was old. The wax sealing the packet was old. Dust had settled behind the reinforcement in a way that could not have happened if I had placed the packet there recently. She looked toward Mercer. Whatever else to believe about me, I did not sew Thomas Blackwood's message into that hat. Wainwright returned to his table. The examiner wrote something down. Mercer stopped looking bored, but the case was far from won. For the next 40 minutes, Wainwright dismantled the past one dead witness at a time. Edwin Pike could not testify. Thomas could not testify. Mary Blackwood could not testify. Abigail Briggs could prove Thomas died at the crossing. She could not prove what Mercer entered into his books. The receipt proved a payment had been acknowledged by Pike. It did not, by itself, prove Mercer personally ordered the later account entry. By noon, even Caleb felt the ground shifting. Wainwright buttoned his coat. What remains here, sir, is grief. He gestured toward Caleb. Very old grief, understandable grief, then toward Emma, and a young woman's interpretation of a hidden note. He looked at the examiner. Grief is not evidence. Caleb stared at the joined receipt for one terrible moment. He thought Wainwright might be right about what they could prove. Not about Thomas, never again about Thomas, but about Mercer. Caleb had placed Blackwood Ranch at risk, and perhaps it still would not be enough. Then a chair scraped behind him. Jacob Miller stood. Then, look at mine. Everyone turned. Miller carried his mortgage forward. Wainwright frowned. Miller set it beside Thomas's freight account. My payment was entered 13 days late. I paid it on time. Wainwright opened his mouth. Another rancher stood. So was mine. Then another. A woman from the Webb property brought receipts her husband had kept in a tobacco tin. A rancher named Carter produced a letter showing that a fee had been added after his original agreement. One contract could be dismissed. 2 might be coincidence. 6 began to look like method. 9 looked like design. The territorial examiner spread documents across the table. The industries were different, the dates separated by nearly 2 decades. Yet the same structure appeared again and again. Payment acknowledged by an intermediary, account entered differently. Penalty added, collateral weakened, property acquired. Mercer's attorney stopped interrupting. Finally, the examiner looked toward the territorial clerk. Send notice to Mercer's offices in Helena and Virginia City. Mercer stood. For what purpose? I want every surviving account ledger related to these notes secured. You have no authority to seize my business records because a handful of debtors dislike their contracts. I have authority to preserve records while determining whether those contracts were fraudulently administered. Mercer's face changed. Only slightly. But Caleb saw it. The examiner continued. All foreclosure proceedings connected to the disputed notes are suspended pending review. Miller closed his eyes. Behind him, someone began to cry. Wainwright leaned toward Mercer and whispered. Mercer did not answer. The hearing ended without confession. It did not need one. That evening, Caleb found Mercer behind the bank. For once, no polished desk stood between them. Mercer looked older. You think you won? I think people started looking. Thomas looked too. Caleb went still. Mercer realized what he had said, then anger overtook caution. Your brother was dead either way. Caleb's hands closed into fists. He did not strike him. Not to us. Mercer scoffed. The dead don't need their reputation. Caleb stared at him. The living do. Then he walked away. 3 weeks later, Caleb received another notice. The suspension covered every Mercer-held note under investigation, Blackwood's included. The bank could not foreclose while the inquiry continued. Caleb sat alone, with the paper for a long time. When he had guaranteed protection for Miller and the other families, he had not known this would happen. He had signed expecting to lose pasture, perhaps the ranch. The fact that the price was never collected did not change the fact that he had been willing to pay it. The territorial investigation spread. Records were secured from Helena, then Virginia City. Old Mercer ledgers appeared. One contained the Blackwood account from 1869. Thomas's payment had been received, then deliberately carried forward as unpaid. The lie finally had a ledger of its own. Mercer was not hanged. He was not shot in the street. Lawyers fought over property, fines, and restitution, but another punishment arrived faster. Men stopped removing their hats when Mercer entered church. Depositors withdrew money. Samuel Bennett paid his note and moved his account elsewhere. Families that once thanked Mercer for donations no longer invited him through their doors. For 19 years, Red Willow had looked at Thomas Blackwood and seen a thief. Now the town looked at Silas Mercer and saw the man who had manufactured one. Later, Caleb found Emma beside the ruined meeting house outside town. You were wrong to take the hat, he said. Emma looked at him. I know. I was wrong too. She waited. I made your mistake mean something about who you were. His voice was quiet. You crossed a line. I decided that meant you had no respect for me. Those are not the same thing. Emma's eyes shone. Can you forgive me? I already have. He stepped closer. I'm trying to deserve the same. Emma touched his face. This time neither stopped halfway. Their kiss was slow, certain. When they separated, Emma remained close. I received a letter. Caleb's expression changed. Pennsylvania? Yes. The school? They're reopening under new management. They offered me the head position. Caleb was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you want it?" The question hurt more than a plea would have. Emma answered truthfully, "I don't know." Winter loosened slowly. The investigation eventually confirmed what Thomas had died trying to expose. His payment had been real. The debt had been false. Part of the property Mary Blackwood lost was ordered restored to Caleb. Among it was a meadow near Red Willow and the stone foundation of an abandoned meeting house. Emma visited once. She did not mention what she imagined there. Weeks later, Ruth asked her to come into town. 6 families waited inside Bennett's store after closing. Mrs. Miller spoke first. "We need a school." Emma blinked. "For the children?" Ruth smiled. "For the horses, Emma." Someone laughed. Mrs. Miller continued. "We've had traveling teachers. Winter lessons, summer lessons. Nothing that lasts." Emma looked around. "You heard about Pennsylvania?" "We did, and you spoke to Caleb." Ruth shook her head. "We asked Caleb to speak to you." "That evening Emma found him repairing a gate. They asked you to persuade me." "Yes." "What did you say?" "He kept working. I told them to ask you themselves." Emma stared. "You didn't even tell me?" "Wasn't my question to ask." 5 words. That was all. Yet they told Emma more about how much Caleb had changed than a declaration could have. 2 days later, he came to the porch holding Thomas's hat. Emma had completed the restoration weeks earlier, but only after Caleb explicitly asked her to. He extended it. "Take it." Emma hesitated, then accepted. The felt was smooth beneath her fingers. The burn remained. The wear along the brim remained. She had repaired the damage without making the hat look new. "You never let anyone touch this." Caleb looked at it. "I didn't know the difference between protecting a memory and being trapped inside it." Emma lifted her eyes. "If you go back to Pennsylvania, I won't ask you to make your life smaller for mine, and if I stay, the families want a school. I know, there's land." Her expression changed. Caleb, he understood immediately. "I haven't promised it," she relaxed. "If the families decide that site works, and if you decide you want the school, I'll transfer the parcel to the district board." "Not to me?" "No." "Not to the ranch?" "No, so you won't own it." "That is the general idea." A small smile appeared on Emma's face. "Why?" "Because if you build something here, it ought to belong to what you're building." She looked toward the distant meadow. "I need time." "Take it." Emma spent 3 days walking, thinking, writing. She imagined Pennsylvania, a proper building, a guaranteed salary, friends she had known for years. Then she imagined Red Willow, Ruth, Martha, children arriving on horseback, a school that did not yet exist. Caleb was part of the decision, but he could not be the entire decision. That distinction mattered. On the 4th morning, she found him at the same gate. "I wrote them." He set down the pliers. "And?" I declined. Caleb did not smile. "Are you certain?" Emma walked closer. "Yes, because of me?" "In part." He waited. "Because of Martha, Ruth, the children, the school." She took his hand. "And because this is where I want to build something instead of simply stepping into something already built." Caleb's fingers closed around hers. Emma smiled. "That's why I'm telling you after I decided." Only then did he smile, slowly, as if the expression had been waiting years to become natural. Spring brought construction to Red Willow. It also brought a stone. Caleb rode with Emma to the small Blackwood cemetery on the hill. Mary Blackwood's grave rested beneath a cottonwood. Beside it stood a new marker. No body lay beneath the earth there. Thomas remained buried near Briggs Crossing, and Caleb had chosen not to disturb him. But his name had come home. The stone read, Thomas Blackwood, 1844 to 1869, He meant to come home. Caleb stood between his mother's grave and his brother's memorial. For years, Mary had died believing her eldest son betrayed her. For years, Caleb had carried the same belief. Now their names stood side by side beneath the Montana sky. Emma remained a few steps away. Caleb removed Thomas's hat. He rested it briefly against the top of the stone, then placed it back on his head. They walked down the hill together. He did not look behind him. They married 3 months later. The ceremony was small. Martha cried before it began and denied it afterward. Ruth stood beside Emma. Amos appeared in a coat so old he claimed it had attended more weddings than he had. Caleb arrived wearing Thomas's hat. Before taking Emma's hands, he removed it, placed it on the back of an empty chair, then stepped away. The ceremony continued. No one guarded the hat. No one needed to. 7 years later, the Red Willow School stood on land once taken from Mary Blackwood through a false debt. The building belonged to the district. Not to Caleb, not to Emma. Children filled it now, their voices carried through open windows on warm afternoons. Emma taught 3 days each week and supervised 2 younger teachers the rest. One summer afternoon, Caleb was repairing fence near the ranch house when small boots pounded through the grass. "Daddy." He looked up. Grace Blackwood was 6 years old, and wearing Thomas's hat, it was enormous on her. The brim had slipped so low she had to tilt her head back to see where she was going. Emma appeared behind her. She stopped. For one instant she remembered another room. Another day, Caleb's voice. Put it down. Grace shoved the brim upward with both hands. Daddy, is this yours? Caleb rested his forearms against the fence. It belonged to someone I loved. Uncle Thomas? Yes. Grace adjusted it. The hat nearly fell over one ear. Can I wear it? Emma watched Caleb. He looked at the faded felt, at the burn near the crown, at the stitching Emma had repaired. Then he looked back at his daughter. For a little while, Grace grinned and ran toward the barn. The hat bounced on her head with every step. Emma came to stand beside Caleb. Neither spoke. Caleb returned his attention to the fence. He pulled the wire tight, fastened it, moved to the next post, and did not look to see where the hat had gone. The end. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories of love, courage, and second chances.